Well, you're all very welcome to another edition of Mind Over Mountains podcast, Summit Leaders podcast, as we call it, with business leaders and with Máirtín Óg McDonagh of Mind Over Mountains. And as always, we chat on this podcast about issues that break out of business leaders' professional lives and into their personal lives, and how you gain balance, and how you really, as you say it, Máirtín, how you get busy living, and create a living, not just, or create a life, not just a living. Isn't that the way you put it, Máirtín? You say it better than I do, so please take it out of my mouth and into yours.
That's correct, Brendan. I'd like to welcome the guys as well, Mary and Jason, and I know Patrick is due shortly, but on behalf of Mind Over Mountains, and you are right, a lot of people are busy creating a living, but I encourage them to create a life. The idea for this podcast, I haven't spoken to either of Mary or Jason, actually. Usually, sometimes people ask for a meeting with myself before coming on the podcast, so fair dues to you guys. You were willing to come on without that meeting. I asked Mary earlier, was she nervous? And she said, no, she said, I don't do nervous. A typical Kerry woman, like, they just don't do nerves. But the idea for this podcast came from a group that I've set up called Summit Leaders, where we bring 5 or 7 individuals, business leaders, together on Zoom calls once a month, where we talk about business-related material, personal stuff, and health and well-being, relationships. So from that, we asked them what would they like to hear about in this podcast series we were putting together. And most of them came back and said, well, we'd like to hear from other business leaders, how they've been coping with their businesses, how they've been coping with their staff, if they have staff and employees, and how they're coping with clients and customers. And last but by no means least, how they're coping themselves. And that's always quite interesting. And I find it, because of the role that I play now in life, that I find it interesting how people are coping within themselves, because sometimes we're searching so much to improve our business, to see what angles we can follow now with all the changes that have come in, that sometimes we forget about ourselves. And that is very important, and our families by extension. So I'd like to welcome everyone again, Brendan, and I'd hand back to you now.
Thanks, Máirtín. Now, Máirtín, we always joke about this. You never know what I'm going to ask you from week to week. And if truth be known, Máirtín, I never know what I'm going to ask you either, because I think the beauty of it is that once you play off the cuff like that, we get very interesting things going up. But it just occurred to me when you're talking about your Summit Leader groups there, that I've never actually asked you, and I don't fully understand it myself, what goes on in them Summit Leader meetings. And you mentioned nervousness there with Mary, and she's not a woman prone to nerves. But let's talk about emotional well-being. Your business leaders, and I don't want you to name names or anything else on your Summit Leader groups, how do they maintain emotional well-being, and how does your groups help them to do that?
Well, first and foremost, naturally enough, when people take the first step to get involved in a group like this, it's a very positive move, because you are going to be in groups with other people who you don't know from various different industries. So that's a really positive move first. Normally, I talk to the people before they come on to the groups and join the Summit Leaders, and I get a sense to where they are in their lives. Within the groups, then, on a monthly basis, we discuss whatever comes up, really, and I give them exercises to do. And it's amazing the way it starts, where somebody will talk about a difficulty they're having in a certain area, and somebody else within that group may have come across it before or will have an opinion on it, and so on. So what's happening really, Brendan, is that the 5 to 6 people who are in the groups, they're actually mentoring one another, and I'm facilitating it. And out of that, I know when I was running 2 very big businesses, and for over 30 years, I lost both businesses in the downturn and the financial crash. I know if I was involved in a group where I could have spoken about the difficulties I was going through, it would have been a huge help. And I'm finding that very interesting now, that these guys are actually talking about their businesses, they're talking about the pressures they feel under. Like Jason said earlier, there's 2 young kids in the house and how he's coping with that. We get all of that where people can share and somebody else will have come across it, and everybody's offering and they're all coaching one another and I'm facilitating it. So from that purpose alone, it does increase that emotional well-being within a person.
Okay. Well, listen, our podcast is about balance and gaining balance in life, especially if you're in business. And I guess when you look at even the title of Mind Over Mountains, it has a lot to do with your state of mind, doesn't it? And if I look at the mountains bit today a little bit, we all have mountains to get over. And in business, if you're running a business, what I feel is, especially if you're trying to mix business and family, that the mountains of business can consume a business owner or a business leader, can't they? How do you separate your business life from life in general? Let me put that differently, Marty. How can you enjoy life in general if business is pressurizing you hugely?
Well, there's a very simple answer to that, Brendan. You just sign up to Mind Over Mountains and we'll get that is a difficulty and a huge difficulty for everybody. And for somebody who was at the cold face and turning over businesses where there was a lot of millions being turned, I know what it's like. And we do in our business life and our careers, if things start to get busy or when they do, we are all inclined to go with it. And within that, what we're doing a lot of the time is we're creating a monster that begins to control us, and everything else becomes secondary. But what we do is we try to get people up in a virtual helicopter, if you like, and to have a look at their lives and see exactly where they're spending most of their time and what is suffering because of that. And even to do that exercise alone, Brendan, has a huge positive effect on people where they say, oh shit, I'm really spending an awful lot of my time in one area. What changes could I make to improve other areas? So that's how we do it. That's the magical formula, and to get people on board to do so.
Okay. Let me turn to the panel now. And it's really nice part of this podcast that I enjoy doing is that we're meeting so many business leaders. Mary, let me turn to you first, Mary Lucey, from Career Ahead. First of all, tell us about your business, what you do, who you serve. But after that, tell me about yourself, personally and professionally, how the last year and a half has been for you.
Okay, thanks for having me on. Great pleasure to be here. I set up Career Ahead last September. Actually, this time last year, I was just thinking about it. I handed in my notice. I was principal of a college, and very busy college, and I had been in public sector for many years working in third level and in further education. And I always wanted to set up my own business from the time I was very, very young. I came from a business background, a family business at home. But I got a position like in the public sector and loved it absolutely in all the areas I worked. But that kind of was still in the background always. And with COVID, it was the first time that I'd ever worked from home. So I was managing the colleges from home. And it was the first taste of not having to get up, rush out in the morning. And not that I wasn't doing the work, I was still doing the work, but it was just from the home environment. And it planted the seed that I think this is going to be now or never, I felt. So on the 1st of September, I set up Career Ahead, as I said. The main reason for it is that I found and do find it very frustrating, the poor retention rates we have in college and the high levels of dropouts. And with those dropouts and the poor retention comes a huge financial, distress, personal distress, and emotional distress for students and their parents. So because I'd worked both in third level and in the further education sector, I have quite unique insight into the entire, I suppose, college journey. So that's actually what I'm doing. I'm providing advice, support, and information for parents and students throughout the entire college journey, prior to making their decision about what course, when they're in college, because sometimes people think, okay, I've started my course, that's it, everything's going to be great. And in actual fact, there's lots of different problems and issues that arise en route from first year to when they graduate. And most of the time, if they have the correct information and advice, they're very easy to overcome. But because they don't know where to go or who to ask to in a lot of cases, and because they're adults and parents can get involved and try and help them, a lot of the time they drop out because of that. So that's my package, is that I offer support. So currently I'm working with a lot of leaving certs. It branched out slightly because a lot of people, because of what I do and connections with the industries, etc. I have a lot of people then that because of COVID are moving around in jobs. So I've also started doing application forms, scholarship application forms, interview prep. So it's broadened, but my main remit and the main aim for setting up Career Ahead was to tackle the retention rates and to enhance them, and to work with colleges and for students and parents and college students so that they have a better experience and they have a positive experience in their college journey.
Great. So your COVID was jumping into business, which is fantastic.
Yes, which probably everybody said, are you mad during COVID, leaving public sector job? It was, but it was probably the first time I took stock. I had to laugh when you were asking, Máirtín, about, people's family lives and working. I mean, I worked like long hours. Now, I loved it, don't get me wrong. And I really found it I loved working with the students, always did. I found it really rewarding. I would be a problem solver and I would be quite creative. So I loved working projects with students and different ideas. And, I really did love all that, but it was quite demanding. And I worked long hours. And so suddenly when I decided to do this, it was like a chance, but I believe in what I do. I know the quality of the information that I possess and that it's quite unique. And I believe that if I can help people and it's the right thing to do, I can't be making a mistake, surely, I hope. So that's how I kind of looked at it. So when I started then, it wasn't during COVID. And it's funny because probably I would be well known in Kerry, where I'm based, linked to education, etc. But because of COVID, I actually have a national platform now. So I work with students and people that are moving jobs and employment and going for promotion, etc. I work from every county now at this stage. So it has worked in favour, the fact that I have a national platform, because I do it all online. I find that students actually, funnily enough, open up an awful lot online, whereas they may not be inclined to, maybe sometimes with face-to-face, and sometimes parents come with them, which normally they prefer to deal with me personally. So it has opened up a completely new market base for me from that perspective. I had to see what it was going to like, working with Zoom. A lot of people said, would I travel and meet them? But when I reassured them I didn't need to, I could still provide the same service online, and it has worked out very well, and they're all very happy with the service. So from that perspective, it's fine. The big difference for me really was that I would consider myself a real people person. And that was quite a change. So suddenly I wasn't dealing with hundreds per day of seeing them. And I actually realized I actually quite enjoy my own company, which I didn't think I would have at the time. So I liked the fact that I could do what I wanted. I'm completely in control of my time now, which I never was before. Some days I decide to work 12 hours a day, and I might take the next day and do something else completely different. But I am in control. If it's really busy, I put in the extra hours. If it's a bit quieter. Initially, the big difficulty for me was the fact that I was so used to having every moment of every day, that I had to work, I had to be somewhere else. I found it difficult, that change initially. So if I didn't have a full day scheduled or timetabled with clients or with students or whatever, I was thinking, oh my God, maybe I made the wrong decision. I found that transition a bit difficult initially.
Yeah.
Whereas I realized it was more managing. So I got better at managing the time and realizing I didn't have to be scheduled dusk every day. It's quite okay to have an afternoon off or whatever. So from that perspective, that was one big change I found.
Yeah.
And I started to go back to exercising a lot more, which I
good.
used to do. And it just, as I said, the job just kind of took over a bit. But of course, that was me as well. I let it, as you said, and I did love it and I enjoyed it. So I didn't feel it was a struggle to work at the position I was in. But I went back exercising a lot more. And like I always ran. So I'm back running I run every day again. I'm back out walking every day. So I certainly have a much better life balance.
Excellent. Delighted to hear that, Mary. Great story. Let me turn to Jason. Jason, tell us about your business, first of all, and then tell us how the year has been for you professionally and personally.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. And kudos to Mary. She's done a lot in the last while, so fair play. So I run the sales team in global shares for our emerging companies. So it's interesting. Mary was talking about venturing out and building her own business and becoming a startup during COVID and taking the plunge. And I speak to startups every day, and a lot of them were pre-COVID. But I think a big part of the job that myself and Global Shares provide is we help companies manage their equity. So if Mary, she forms her business and she owns 100% of the company, and then someone decides to come in and invest in that company, how much is Mary going to give up? And what is the valuation of that company? And then she might hire 10 employees, and do they get shares? And the whole concept becomes very complex very quickly. And what we find, even during COVID, it was quite interesting. So pre-COVID, everybody's used to investors coming in and just saying, hey, we want to invest in your company. You're brilliant. Here's 20 million. Oh, I'm fantastic. I'm valued at X, and the founders are great and the board is great. And that's one challenge that we help solve around how you value your company, how you go through those conversations with investors and law firms. But what was really interesting during COVID was the mind shift of those founders, co-founders, CEOs. So if you think of it, if you're the founder of a retail shop pre-COVID or a retail chain, even though retail itself is probably a poor example, we just take it as something that was bricks and mortar, and you had a valuation prior to COVID of X. When you're in the middle of COVID, that valuation has probably dropped 80, 90%. And what we found was founders and startups were trying to think of new ways to raise capital, not just giving away a chunk of their company, because the valuation of that company is not necessarily the same. But the flip side of that, Brendan, is you've seen companies during COVID. I remember there was a company in Cork, I can't remember their name, but they were a hair and beauty logistics provider. And I think they made sanitary devices for barbers and hairdressers. And they pivoted at the start of COVID to making hand sanitizer. And they literally exploded. I think they had a couple of $100 million in investment. They hired 120 people. They had to open a new factory. And that was because they pivoted their entire business strategy to suit COVID.
Yeah.
So I think, you go back to the last recession, a lot of the big blue chip companies that exist today didn't even exist prior to the last recession. They were formed through the recession. So I think what is a pleasure for me to do every day as part of my job in Global Shares is help startups and high growth companies, I suppose, imagine how they're going to grow, bring their their employees along. It was a very interesting. One of the points you made, Marie, about keeping students in school and retention, and also attracting students to school, is the very same challenge founders have in their companies of attracting new employees and keeping the employees they actually want. And that's where equity and shares, everything that we talk about in Global Shares comes into play. Because if I want to be part of this really successful company and I'm going to stick around for 5 years, I want to know what's in it for me apart from my salary. Like, am I going to benefit from the company being valued at $1 billion? Or am I going to benefit from the next round of investment because other people are going to benefit in the company? I've been working hard. And that's another challenge that startups and high growth companies need to adjust to. So that's a bit of what we do here. And then obviously there's I suppose more of the complexities that we do it globally. So global shares are in 17 countries. We help the biggest public and private companies in the world. So Saudi Aramco and companies like Coupang that you may or may not know of. They're like the Asian version of Amazon. And they're doing that for thousands of employees across hundreds of countries. So the concept, early stage when you're a founder, seems very simplistic, but that can really transform very quickly. And most of the people that we start out talking to are doing all this on an Excel spreadsheet, which isn't the best plan. It's a plan, but it's definitely not the best plan. So that's a small bit of the context of.
Okay, it's very interesting work, Jason. And tell me, what about yourself personally? I mean, is it so consuming that other areas would suffer a small bit in your life?
Yeah, so I kind of wrote down a few as Marie was talking. I was just thinking kind of, how would I have summed up my life to date and kind of what drives me and how did I get. I'd like to think I made it through the pandemic, even though I know we're still technically in a pandemic, but hopefully we're all not thinking that way anymore. But I think like for me, I put down like I maybe go through a few words and I'll be very, very brief in them. But I put down activity, and maybe I think Marie just touched on that in her final point about exercise. I'd definitely be a very active person. Mm-hmm. I play lots of different sports. I've been involved in sports since I was 4 or 5 years of age. That was always my outlet. So I would train with my local soccer club, Carrickline, 2 or 3 nights a week. That could be after working 12 hours to 14-hour days. It just gave me a break. It broke up. It was an hour or two away, got my endorphins going. And it was just, that's my outlet for whatever stress or anxiety or whatever it was. And obviously then COVID took all that away for everybody. And I think I hired a lot of people during COVID as well. So I pretty much built a new team. I think I hired 15 or 16 people during COVID. Most of the people I'd never met face to face. They'd never been in an office. They were working from home. And I think for me, what I had to become, and I made this comment on a few different podcasts I've been on, that I became more of a psychologist than a sales manager, because there's lots of complexities in running a business, revenue operations, sales operations, customer success, marketing, all that kind of stuff. But the main challenge was the people. You had to support them. You had to understand what motivates them, because they are all going through their own stuff. And I suppose I had to take all of that on my shoulders. And probably what dropped off with Brendan was I probably didn't really think about myself much, to be honest. And I think, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, I have a 3-year-old daughter. I have a 1-year-old son, and having that experience in the during COVID, where you can't really even go into the hospital for the birth. You're not really you can't even support your wife as much as you'd want. That was a challenge for me. Like, that was because a couple of other words I wrote down was, the challenge I have is I want to be the best husband I can be, the best father I can be, and also be the best leader I can be. And each one of those 3 things draws different demands from me physically, mentally. So that's always a constant, balance and act I'm trying to do. And ultimately, I care about my job. I care about my team. I care about my career. I've invested a lot of time in myself over the years, both as myself, but also my wife has made sacrifices to help me do that. But I love my family and my wife more, right? So that's the balance and act that I've tried to manage. And just one final point, and maybe back to you for a question. But the big thing I found in the 15 months that I was probably working from home was there was no off switch. There was no change in my environment. So I would happily sit at a desk at home and I could work 16 hours and not get up from the desk, because I'm just going from call to call to meeting to something's popped up, someone's got an issue, or I need to be there for somebody. And my family was getting neglected, not necessarily by choice, but just because it was it was my job, right? I had no alternative. And since I've kind of come back into the office, you know, myself remotely kind of over the last month, I find that I'm now finding it easier to transition back from work to home. And I know a lot of people love the idea of working remotely forever and never being back in an office. I think there's a fine balance between having that and having a hybrid approach. And I think, you know, one thing that Global Shares have done really well, and the HR team and the management team, is allowing people to try to figure out the work-life balance that will work for them going forward. And I think that gives a level of, it kind of just reduces any stress and anxiety you have, because if you feel like going into the office on a Tuesday, you can go in. If you feel like, you know, today I just want to work from home because I'd be more productive, that flexibility is there. And I think that's very important as well, to give that work environment for people.
Okay. Thanks. A very busy man. I just wrote down there, very little place for weeds in that garden. So, you know.
No weeds in my garden.
No.
I've what was it? Roundup, is it? Is that what they call it? Is it? Yeah. I spray a Roundup every day.
Let me go to Patrick Hogan of CBox now. Patrick, how are you? And welcome onto the podcast.
Hey, Brendan, apologies. I was stuck in traffic. It's not used to this traffic thing since.
Oh, no worries. No worries at all. Patrick, tell us a bit about your business first of all, and then how the last year has been for you, professionally and personally.
Yeah, so for CBox Group in Ireland, it was set up in 2016. We're an Irish-American company. So myself and Jim Brennan, who's the CEO of CBox Inc. in the US, set up that as the EMEA arm to the business. And we're in container modifications, and we do anything that can be fitted into a container. Our predominant is military. So we're a military contractor, US military and militaries around the world. Our sales mix is completely changed since 2016. We're commercial and rental and military as well. But in Ireland, our vision at the start completely changed. So we in 2017 we purchased a small mechanical engineering firm, and we renamed it and called it CBox Energy. So they have a couple of patents for heating systems and things like that allows the system to run better in a house or an office or in a plant room. So obviously containers, plant rooms is where we wanted to be with that. And I've been then as we went on, I saw a huge gap in the market compared to the United States for housing and turnkey housing, in the sense of one place where you can get everything from the tradesman to the couch. So I set up an online e-commerce marketplace in 2019 called EnergyStore.ie, and within a couple of weeks, I knew I was onto something, because we use small retailers, very similar to the Amazon third-party idea, that we would charge a percentage for them to join. We put all their products online for free. We de facto become their marketing arm of their businesses, and these were small businesses, so they didn't have anything at all, and they didn't have the experience. But working with them, building up the data, but also as well bringing in construction workers and bringing in construction side of things. So we were in e-commerce, but we were more focused on project e-commerce, like an open BIM, so building information modeling system. But when we go to 2020, in February, I was in the United States. We're working on a modular project that we're heavily invested in, and I saw a lot of things happening with the market here, and it really was a change was coming. So supply chain was an issue and things like that. And to be completely honest with you, a lot of Irish buyers and groups would not talk to us because we're online. And the week of the lockdown starting here, I signed a deal with a very large buying group, European buying group, and I completely flipped the model for Energy Store. We became more of a retailer, basically a retailer, and we then imported everything into the country. We supplied I went on developing on our supply chain system, but also as well bringing nearly over a weekend, myself and one of my e-commerce specialists who I trained, to put up nearly 22,000 products over a weekend. And when we had, as no one's gone through a pandemic, we had a lot of changes throughout it, and we then went into the supermarket idea as well, where we looked at more of a Costco US model, where you're going and buying volume bulk delivered to the door, so helping people with that. Also as well, helping people like that needed a fridge and they needed it installed. We literally went out to customers' houses, and we were a small team because I had 16 in the team, but 4 of us in the office. So because we had our construction arm, and we also had our, which is Smart Builder, and we had the iTrolley team. We kind of married them both together, especially in lockdowns and that, and we saw growth of nearly 4,000% last year of sales.
Wow.
We completely changed our model. And interesting fact, when Leo Varadkar came out about the original lockdown, myself and my sales manager were sitting in St. Dr. Stephen's Park, talking to the HSE about mobile hospitals and how fast they could be deployed up to 8,000 beds. Thank God that never happened, but
Yeah.
it could have been really bad. But
Yeah.
I was very impressed with them. But in a nutshell, we're a construction e-commerce company, but everything has to do with housing, and trying to fix the housing issue here. And we amalgamate now this year mortgages with our partner Bank of Ireland Finance. We try to help smaller construction teams as well by allowing them finance through commercial finance, and helping to supply and kind of creating a hub system similar to I see Jason mentioned he was from Cork, so Republic of Work inside in Cork, or WeWork, a hub of construction people together. But then you also have your e-commerce as well. Like I looked at our figures just for this podcast, and we've increased our figures by 800% of items sold. We've surpassed what we'd done last year already in the first 6 months. Personally, it's been a whirlwind. During COVID, I wasn't at home. I was out all the time. I was in the car. I think the first lockdown, I did 15,000 kilometers in 12 weeks. I actually ended a relationship after 8 years as well, which probably was brought on more from the lockdown. But I have a completely new life now, in the sense that I'm with someone nearly a year now as well. Now again, so it has been a whirlwind, and looking after staff. Looking after staff was a major concern for me. Again, I didn't have a clue, like anyone, what was the best course of action for this. Stay at home, basically. But I brought in antigen testing back in June last year, and I tested everyone that was in the office every single day. And if we had only one case, and that's when the first time I brought in the antigen testing was, I had a paramedic the next day inside, and we tested everyone. It was only one case, so it wasn't got in the office, which is great. The person though went on to be fairly sick, young and healthy, so and she's just coming out of it now. But in an overall, I think for lockdown, not a whole pile change for me. But I do think I definitely have the work balance now. I do take I probably do 100 hours a week still, but when it's your own, you have to. But I do try to be home for 4 to 7, that kind of time limit there, that I'm home, myself and my partner go for a coffee, and we sit down for dinner together, and there's no phones. But like I'm out of the house since 4:30 a.m. this morning. I've done 890 kilometers already today, so it's very busy, which is great, and I'm delighted about. And the pandemic is good for some businesses, and unfortunately bad for other businesses. But I think we're seeing the just rewards for trying to help people and provide a service over the last 18 months.
Okay. Listen, that's very interesting. You're all very, very busy people, no doubt about it. And I think if I turn back to Máirtín now for a minute, what we've heard between Mary and Jason and Patrick, I think you're looking at huge success stories coming out of the COVID period. Mary especially having jumped from public sector into private sector and building a business at that time. Jason leading a team, and it looks to me like leading a team and a young family and a busy life and really active himself. And you look at Patrick then, who has, if I'm reading this correctly, Patrick, you've totally remodeled your business and your life in many ways over the last year or so. And you've seen huge growth, and I can even feel the energy coming back of you. You're extremely busy in terms of all of that. Máirtín, any reflections on what you've heard?
Yeah, Brendan, I'd agree with you. They're very interesting people, very driven. A couple of words, you know, that I wrote down there. I heard Jason talking about a no off switch, which, you know, I was that person myself. I heard Mary talking about, you know, leaving, as you said, the public sector work behind, and that she was a problem solver and a creative person. And I believe she's living that life now. But she did say that she found that, you know, it was getting the better of her for a while, and that it had got very busy, but that she feels more in control of it now. But Patrick then is, you know, the success story of, you know, the percentages and the improvement and everything. But the only thing I would say, guys, and I'm an advocate of it, I sometimes success and a huge amount of it can be lethal. So I would just say to you guys, you know, I ended up in the Mater Hospital 14 months ago. I got 4 stents put in. I'm a very fit guy, always have been. But I dealt with a chronic stress for a lot of years. And my cholesterol level was low, it was below 5. My resting heartbeat was low because I do a lot of exercise. I cycled across America. I've been to every space camp. But I know when my business was getting very big and growing, and I was very successful, I was putting so much of myself into it, and I was nearly paying lip service to other stuff. So that's the only thing I'd say to you guys, every one of you, is be careful that you control it a bit more, and do a bit more than paying lip service to your own health and well-being and to your relationships. That's all, and that's the message I give to you. And I congratulate you all on your successes, and on Jason being a new dad, I suppose, even though it's a year. And it's hugely successful. And that's been a huge ingredient in these podcasts, that people have turned this COVID on its head. Some people have started new businesses like Mary, other people like Jason. He said he became, you know, a bit of a psychologist for staff, and it's brilliant. Patrick looked at what opportunities he could take. So there's a lot of good stories in there, but just my message, guys, is just be careful that you're not just paying lip service. Mind your health and mind your well-being.
Can I prod you a little bit there, Máirtín? Because I know the guys are not going to do this on this, but I'm finding from what I hear from Mary and Patrick and Jason, and what we hear regularly on this podcast, and it's natural because these are business leaders. I'm hearing a lot of adrenaline in a way, like a really honed athlete who goes out playing professional footballer. It's the same for these business owners in terms of where they are in their business. You got to have your adrenaline right and focused on your business. when you were running your multi-million businesses and you were extremely, extremely busy and extremely successful, could you see any danger signs, or were you just feeling the adrenaline of the business itself?
You're talking about the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yes.
I could. I'm writing a book. I'm 2/3 of the way through it at the moment. And it's amazing looking back at my life to get to here. I'm 60 years of age. I definitely was. And I know, like, from, I suppose, pushing my body to some of the challenges that I now do, it is such a fine line in sporting, from a sporting context, and I'm sure Jason would agree with me, that, you know, you can push yourself so far, but sometimes you need rest days and sometimes you need to pull back. But we don't apply that to our businesses as much as we should. And our bodies and our minds, we're just not physically able to cope with overloading all the time. And I'm coming back to the warnings, and you are right, Brendan. At the time I was a lot younger and I didn't see it. I felt like if the door wasn't open, I'd walk through the wall, kind of a mentality, you know. And if I didn't get 1,000 things done in a day, it wasn't a great day. So that does need to be controlled. Like a sports person or a professional sports person, they have to take rest days and they have to ease back on their training every couple of weeks. The same applies to business people as well.
Okay. Could I just add to that, Brendan, if you don't mind?
Absolutely, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, you know, I've always, from a nutrition's point of view and best practices, when I play sports, you talk about hydration, you talk about stretching and warming up and, you know, looking at the best athletes and what are they doing to get that extra 1%. And what's ironic is I don't think people actually apply that to their job as much as they should, right? You know, if you're going to go for a run, you'll stretch, you'll hydrate beforehand. If you're going to go into a business meeting, not everybody kind of, you know, does the same kind of practice. And even for me, myself, there was days there where I didn't, as I said earlier on, I wouldn't have got up from my desk to have a glass of water because I'm just so like, you know, but I wouldn't go out and play a match like that because I'm like, oh, geez, I need to have a glass of water before, you know, I need to hydrate. And I find it very ironic that, you know, you have one mindset for one part of your life and you kind of either have a different mindset or you neglect yourself for another part of your life. And I think that's based a lot on the environment you're in and I suppose how you allow the external factors to really influence you.
Yeah.
And just the last point, I was even thinking of like Miriam and Patrick and the success they've had and what Máirtín was saying about, you know, I suppose taking on that success. And a lot of the founders and high growth startups that we talk to in Global Shares, one of the main problems they have is leaving go of something. Because it's theirs, they've come up, they've done all the hard work, they've, you know, it's their concept, it's their money, it's their hard work, it's their sweat, it's their energy. But at some point, you have to leave go of certain parts of that to allow it to really blossom. And I think that's been a big struggle for people during the pandemic is when to let go of a part of your business so that someone else can come in and breathe new life into it and give it that focus.
Yeah. Listen, before we finish up, I'm just going to ask each of you very, very briefly, tell me for the next year ahead, very quickly, personally and professionally, what are your ambitions? Let me start with you, Mary.
My ambitions for the next year is to continue to grow the business. As part of the business, I get involved in a lot of initiatives and projects that will benefit students, linking up with a number of partners. I'm aware the students have difficulty from the point of view of nutrition. Jason mentioned it, eating properly, you know, budgeting properly, trying to present themselves properly when they're on work placement, etc. So I'm teaming up with a number of people to look at that side of it. The business itself, I'm hoping that I'm going to grow my customer base, my clients, and reach out to more colleges and have more contacts. And I hope that I will have an impact and that more students will be happier in the courses will suit them better, and that they will retain and have a positive outcome from the courses. That's from the business point of view. Personally, I hope to continue with, I hear all people saying about the life balances. I hope to continue to maintain the balance that I've introduced a bit better now, and to continue with that really, and to keep it focused. I suppose as well, I came from a business background, as I mentioned, and from very young age, like the work ethic that was instilled in me, and the work ethic and the way we worked from my family background, it certainly had a huge impact on my work ethic to date. And I mean, I never see anything as a problem. I never, look at it that I'm working too long. I never look at anything like that. And it's certainly because it's been instilled in me from a very young age. And I think that actually, and that work ethic has driven me to where I am today. And
Yes.
qualities and traits that were developed at a very young age are certainly still standing to me today as we go along.
Great. Patrick, your ambitions for the year ahead?
I think expand the business. We're doing well at the moment, but I want to look at more European markets. I want to look into the United States. Bring a bit more of as Jason said there, the capital investment and being able to build a team within that capital investment, which would help myself for my life balance, but also as well trying to build a team. I have a really good CFO now, and I have a really good COO, so it really helps. But building that team and building people that can sustain my for me to take a holiday, because I took one and I took 17 hours of my Monday then to cover all the work. But to be able to take some time off and kind of recharge, relax, I think is a major part of my 2020 personally, or 2021.
And lastly, to you, Jason.
Yeah, I was laughing at Patrick there when he said he wants to expand his business, and he said he grew 4,000%.
Yes.
So I was like, this year he wants to grow 5,000%. I think for me, on a professional note, like we're doing amazing stuff with Global Shares. The company is an Indigenous Irish company. It was set up in West Cork 16 years ago. Most of the people that were here then are still here now, which is really unique, especially in this day and age where retention is not, if someone stays in a job 2 years, that's seen as a long time. So we're doing some amazing stuff, helping people like, Patrick and Marie, really understand how their equity and their shareholdings has an impact, and how, they can scale their company. And I think there's a lot of challenges globally for that, especially as companies get new investment. There's a lot of capital investment out there, but it's a tricky story to navigate. So really just making sure that we continue on our mission to do that. On a personal note, I'm mad for writing things down. I want to forget 3 words, right? I want to forget COVID, variant, and lockdown. So over the next 12 months, I want to forget that those words ever existed. And I suppose another thing is I want my kids to start living a bit. I remember when I was a young fella, wasn't all that long ago, but when I was a young fella, just going out playing with my friends on the street, bloody playing with chessies, or, like just basic stuff that my kids have not experienced yet. And I think it's really important for their development that they start living a bit. So that's really big. They've had a tough time over the last 15 months. And yeah, I think that's kind of some of the main things for me anyway.
Is there one word that I can just add to Jason's there? Can we have lockdown traffic though, please, God? Because
yeah,
really bad at the moment.
Yeah. Great stuff. Listen, Máirtín, anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone again, and it's been super actually. I'm amazed at these podcasts and the stuff that comes up. It's brilliant. And I would just tell the guys when we finish recording now just to hang on for 1 minute.
Great. Thanks a million, guys. Listen, it's been wonderful chatting to you all. Thank you.